Welcome to the Voice Detective Show. I'm your host, Liane, aka the Voice Detective. On today's show, I'm back in Melbourne, Australia to catch up with Liane Keegan. Her latest Vaughan Williams concert series with the Ensemble Creatus is set to take place throughout this year at the Victorian Artists Society in Melbourne. Notably, Dame Nellie Melba began teaching her vocal technique to students at the Victorian Artists Society in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Stay tuned for an insightful conversation about the English art song and Vaughan Williams' contribution to it. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you. Great. So I'd like to start off with your latest project, XLM Arts and Ensemble Creatus. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, XL Arts started about 13 years ago now when I came back from overseas, and I felt there was a need to create something for young singers to give them experience and to give them a little bit of exposure. So we created XL Arts, and we did lots of different programs. We had several operas that we did during that time. We did Rusalka in Czech, which was the first time it had been performed in Victoria, let alone in Czech. And we did Dido and Aeneas, and we did a wonderful program of Mozart as well, excerpts from different Mozart operas. We had visiting professionals, so we had pianists, conductors, repetiteurs and language coaches that came and worked. We did workshops that ran for 3 days over a weekend, and they were all very successful. We, of course, going into COVID was very difficult to keep going. So post-COVID, we thought, well, let's reinvigorate in some way. And I'd been talking to lots of singers, sort of from mid-30s onwards, who, once these young artist programs had run their course, there wasn't really that much for them to do if they wanted to remain in Melbourne, but they wanted to keep singing. So Toni Lalich, who's our extraordinary music director, who's also an exquisite pianist, she and I were talking about something we could do that was different, but that could help singers to keep singing, give them something to keep singing for, and to keep them working on their craft. So we decided that Ensemble Creatus would be the more mature version of XL Arts, and so that's going to be our way forward.
What are the specifics of the English art song, and how does it differ to German Lieder?
Well, you have to be a slave to the text. And by that, I mean you have to tell the story. So no matter what language you're singing in, you still have to tell the story. I think the interesting thing about singing in English is that many singers take it for granted that if they are English, and that's their first language, that they're singing in English so they don't have to work at it. But of course the diction and the storytelling means that for the listener, they're part of the story. So if we just stand there and spout the words, then the audience doesn't really get the beauty of the poetry or understand the way it's been crafted with the song. I think both in lieder and in art song, that's, you know, extraordinary what these composers have been able to achieve. But as I said, with Vaughan Williams, he really loved the English language. He studied history and literature at Cambridge and was a lifelong reader. He could read up to 6 or 7 books a week. And poetry, he sort of gobbled up. He absolutely loved it. And apparently he had this overstuffed drawer in where he wrote, which had all of his poetry that he wanted to compose works for. Many of his orchestral pieces were also stimulated by pieces of literature or by poetry. But for me, there's no difference between singing lieder, which is sung in German, or singing art song in English, because it's all about the storytelling.
You chose Ralph Vaughan Williams pieces for your first concert. Why?
Well, Ralph Vaughan Williams, after my 13 years in the UK, has a very special place in my heart. He's a very evocative composer who, when I think about England, that music like Ascending and all of these beautiful pieces that he wrote, even the film music that he wrote, are there in my head when I think about the English countryside. But he also, to me, more so than Elgar, was a quintessentially English composer in that he set the English language so beautifully for voice. He loved the voice, and he chose poetry that is so easy to express and sing in. Even the very early pieces that we sang, or the early poetry that we sang yesterday, which were from the 15th and 16th centuries, and indeed some of the texts were from the Bible. He sets them in a way that really does sort of glorify the voice, which makes it a very grateful thing to do when you're a singer. We were looking for a composer that we could extend over our 3 programs. He wrote a lot for the voice, and he also felt that the voice could express things that other instruments couldn't. And of course, that human connection with us making sound and you experiencing that sound is a very intimate thing. And he loved that about art songs. So when we were thinking about an art song series, he was the only composer really that we couldn't go past.
Ralph professed to be agnostic, but I note from the pieces you performed yesterday, he was deeply spiritual.
Yes, he was. He was very connected to nature and to mankind. He was a socialist. He believed that everyone should be equal. He was very fortunate in that he had an income from his family, and that meant that he didn't go without, and he didn't have to think about what he had to do for work, and that actually helped him to become a composer because he wasn't having to go to work. He did take a position as an organist, which he hated because he wasn't fond of the organ, but he took that because he loved working with the choirs. He was learning to write for choirs at that time, and he felt that the keyboard would also help him become a greater composer, which indeed it did later on. He worked with Ravel, and Ravel advised him to work with the piano rather than any other form of instrument.
What do you need to sing Vaughan Williams songs?
Well, I think technically they are quite demanding because he liked to use all of these extraordinary intervals. You also need a great command of the legato line, which I think is vitally important because his music is through composed, and you have to think through in a very linear way right through to the end of the phrase. You do that with all of your singing, of course, but with Vaughan Williams in particular. He uses the poetry in a way that keeps the listener going right the way through to the end of the song. There's very few piano interludes in the middle of a song. He uses postludes a lot, so at the end of the song he quite often has a page of music for the accompaniment. But I think technically you need a singer who is willing to be a great storyteller, the legato line, and definitely clear diction, without a doubt.
Tell us about the Victorian Artists Society and your collaboration with it.
Well, we had a wonderful meeting with Liane, and Liane is a coloratura soprano who was studying in America and starting to perform in America during COVID, but of course everything finished during COVID over there as well, and things took a long time to get started again. So Carrie came back to Australia. She's now the manager of the Victorian Artists Society, and Toni suggested that we go and have a meeting with her about the possibility of us doing a concert or two there. So we had a lovely meeting with Carrie and a tour around the beautiful gallery, and very shortly after that we felt that a concert series might be a great thing to do. So when we suggested that, Carrie said, well, that would be wonderful, and also wonderful if you became our artists in residence for the year this year. So that's how we are at the Victorian Artists Society, and after our first concert yesterday, we're thrilled that we're there. It's just such a beautiful venue surrounded by all that magnificent art.
Do you see any connections between Richard Wagner and Vaughan Williams?